G'day and welcome back to our series on talking about Jesus. We started out by seeing how the gospel helps us overcome some of the barriers in our own hearts to sharing our faith with people. We've been seeing how making disciples is actually part of what it is to be a disciple, is to be a disciple maker, both encouraging other believers in church, but also reaching out to those who don't know Jesus to share our faith with them. But it still seems like a big and scary and impossible task, doesn't it? Well, the purpose of this video is to break down seeing someone come to faith into a journey of smaller steps that on their own are actually relatively achievable. We need to change our thinking about what evangelism is. Evangelism isn't one sweaty conversation that has to communicate everything about Jesus and have someone repent and believe then and there. It's more about an intentional relationship, a journey that sees us walking with someone towards Jesus. And there's many steps along the way. It might be weeks, months, years before we see someone make a commitment. But if we can travel with someone, getting to know them, in relationship with them, sharing Jesus along the way, that's often the most fruitful way. This isn't to say there's no place for something like cold contact evangelism, door knocking, or walk-up evangelism. And in fact, often when there's no relationship at stake, you can actually go further with someone because they don't really care what you think. But usually, people coming to Jesus comes out of a relationship. We need to remember that people's beliefs are often quite private things. Maybe if someone's an atheist, they're quite happy to be front out and tell you all the reasons that your faith is silly. But at a more deeper level, often those beliefs or convictions that atheists have actually have a history to them. And often there's personal hurt and grievances or misunderstandings as well behind them. And those things don't come out unless there's a relationship there that can bear the strain of having those conversations. To take a sidestep for a moment, at a practical level, we have our New Life prayer cards at Valley. On one side, there's 5 spaces for you to write down someone you can be praying for, a work colleague, a friend, a neighbour, a family member, and someone else you haven't met yet, which gives you that mindset of wanting to meet more people to share Jesus with. But on the other side, down the bottom there's these 4 steps: connect, care, communicate, commit. And this is about us trying to break down the process of seeing someone come to faith into small steps which are actually relatively achievable on their own. Connect is about making relationships, building relationships. Care is about expressions of interest in someone's life, taking an interest in them and valuing what they're concerned about. Communicate is about actually starting to talk about Jesus and your own faith, maybe inviting someone to the life course or to read the Bible with you or invite someone to come to church. And commit is that goal we were hoping for, where someone comes to faith in Jesus. But what you can see is it happens over time with a series of steps. Maybe the first step for you is actually realizing there's not that many people in my life who aren't Christian. Maybe there's that relative in my family, or there's that person I've sort of kept in touch with from high school, but everyone else is basically my Christian friends. Maybe something we need to do is make an effort to be building relationships with people who aren't Christian, even taking on a new interest like joining a sporting club or something like that. But actually, there's often many people in our life that we already have connections with that we could just make more of the connections, whether it's families you meet with school drop-off or playgroup or work colleagues or people that you're on the same bus with every day. There's people all around us, our neighbours, that we have contact with. There's actually relationships there that we can build more deeply. So how do you build those relationships? Well, we're going to talk for a minute about layers, pipes, and doorways. So if you think about topics of conversation with people in everyday life, you can think about it in 3 layers. On the outside layer, there's kind of what you did on the weekend, what the weather's doing, that local sport team that you follow. Anyone can talk about those things, and they're pretty casual. There's no stress involved, no anxiety, no tension, no relationship really required. At a deeper level, there's values, things that I care about, which are actually a bit closer to my heart. Beyond that, there's beliefs, the things that mean that I value those things in my life. You know, I really care that my child has a chance to have an education. Why? Because I think that's the future of the hope of humanity, is the people being educated. I've gone to a deeper level to share something about myself and what I believe. And some people, while some might be happy to wear their heart on the sleeves, most people tend to keep those inner circles quite hidden. Maybe they don't want to offend you by sharing something that you disagree with. Maybe they don't want to be offended or hurt by you disagreeing with them. So for us to have a conversation about someone's faith, their worldview, their deepest values, They need to know that we're a person that they can trust. We're someone that they can be vulnerable around. We're someone who is safe. Another way of expressing this is we need to build the pipeline. You can think about your relationship with someone else like a pipe, and anything you want to communicate has to fit down that pipe. If you want to talk about the weather, that's fine. But if you want to talk about the gospel, about who God is, what God is like, about sin and what that is, about the death of Jesus and why that matters to you, about what it looks like to follow Jesus and respond to him, that's a lot of water, if you like, to fit down a small pipe. If you try and shove it all down, the pipe's either going to break or it's going to come through in a razor-sharp needle of water, like in one of those dodgy campground shower heads. Now, if you want to get a large volume of meaningful information communicated with someone, you need to build the pipe, enlarge the pipe, grow the pipe. How do we do that? Well, there's two really great ways to build the pipe and build a relationship with someone. One is just spending time with them, which is pretty intuitive, I think, to most of us. But the other is listening, active listening. In Proverbs 18, we're told to speak before listening is foolish and a shame. In James 1, we read, everyone should be slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to become angry. Listening to people is a really valuable way of communicating that we care about them. It shows that we're interested in what's going on in their heart, in their life, in their mind. But it also enables us to understand them so that when it comes to us communicating the gospel with them, we're able to do it in a way that's going to connect with them, empathize with them, and resonate with them. But often what happens when we listen to someone is we listen in a way that's kind of distracted. Maybe it's because I'm thinking about what I'm going to cook for dinner or what I'm going to do on the weekend. Sometimes we just listen for the next chance for me to say something. Other times we listen and we're kind of looking all the time for an exit route. But when we listen actively, it's about giving your attention to the other person. And this is true and valuable theologically because every person is made in God's image. Every person is uniquely valuable and precious to God. Every person ought to have a unique interest to us. And by listening to someone, we communicate that they are interesting, that they're valued, and that we care about them. We can break down active listening into 3 steps. Paying attention to what someone's saying, responding with empathy, and then asking a follow-up question. This is especially important when it comes to someone sharing something meaningful or close to their heart, because often we can run away from a conversation that's starting to get intense or personal and go back to something that's either more comfortable or something that I actually want to talk about. But active listening is about letting the other person have the floor and giving them the time and space to express what's on their mind. G'day Jordan, how you going?
Doing all right, thanks, Ben. Just a bit anxious at the moment with my sister being in the UK on her own. Just the lockdown's making it a bit difficult for her.
Yeah, right. Speaking of the lockdown, did you see the footy's back? I'm really looking forward to Geelong getting smashed on the weekend. That's going to be awesome.
Doing okay, thanks, Ben. Just a bit anxious about my sister at the moment. She's in the UK, just struggling a bit with the lockdown at the moment.
Yeah, right, because she's on her own over there, isn't she? It must be pretty hard. What's going on with her at the moment?
Yeah, just looking for work and trying to find a place to stay.
Building relationships with people takes time. Often building trust takes time. But active listening also can really help us when it comes to having a conversation about faith. Sometimes it's easy just to drop the conversation as quick as we can and kind of think, well, I tried. Other times it's easy for us to get defensive. But actually, responding calmly and graciously often enables us to go further in a conversation than we might think was possible. So Jordan, I never really asked you what you think about God and Jesus and all that.
I don't really have time for that stuff, Ben.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So what are you doing on the weekend? I asked you what you think about God and Jesus and all that.
I don't really have the time for that stuff, Ben.
Okay, so it just never really interested you?
Yeah, and I just kind of think it's all a bit of nonsense, just a bunch of fairy tales, yeah.
A bunch of fairy tales? I mean, this is kind of what I base my life around, and you reckon it's fairy tales? Jordan, I never really asked you what you reckon about God and Jesus and all that.
I don't really have time for all that stuff, Ben.
Yeah, okay. It just doesn't interest you, or?
Yeah, it's always just been kind of nonsense and fairy tales to me.
Yeah, okay. So is that just because there's not much basis for it, or
Yeah, there are just so many things that are hard to believe in the Bible. Miracles and people rising from the dead. It's just a bit much.
yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a lot of pretty out there stuff that doesn't happen in my life every day. That's for sure. Do you reckon if there was a God, would he be able to do that kind of stuff?
I suppose so. But how do we know there's a God?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I reckon the big thing for me has always just been Jesus and the evidence for him. And if you look at his life, the historical evidence for it, but even just the things he says, sometimes it just takes your breath away. I wonder, do you reckon you'd be interested in just catching up and reading a bit of the Bible together and chewing on it?
Yeah, right. I'm happy to have a listen.
By breaking evangelism down into a relationship on a journey, we can see that we can actually start taking small steps, getting to know people, having them in our home, sharing life with them, listening to what matters to them, trying to understand them as a person, building trust, enlarging that pipeline that means that we can actually hear what they have to say and communicate the gospel in time to them in a way that makes sense. What do you say when it comes to that opportunity? Well, that's what we're going to talk about next.